Look around you right now. Everything appears sharp, defined, in perfect focus. The edges of objects are crisp. The boundaries between things are clear. Your phone has a definite shape. The wall has a precise location. Your hand has exact edges where it ends and space begins. This crystal clear reality feels so obvious, so undeniably real, that questioning it seems absurd. Of course, reality is in focus. Of course, things have sharp boundaries and definite properties. This is just common sense. But I'm about to show you something that will shatter this illusion forever. Because Werner Heisenberg discovered that reality itself is fundamentally out of focus. Not just difficult to see clearly, not just blurry around the edges, but literally, mathematically, permanently out of focus at the deepest level of existence. The universe doesn't have sharp edges. Objects don't have definite boundaries. Properties don't have precise values. Everything you think you see in perfect focus is actually a quantum blur, a cosmic smear of probability that only appears sharp because your brain is desperately trying to make sense of something that is inherently senseless. Reality is out of focus, and it can never be brought into focus, no matter how hard we try. This is Heisenberg's most terrifying discovery, and once you understand it, you'll never see the world the same way again. For thousands of years, humans believed that reality had what we might call perfect resolution. Like a high-definition photograph, the universe was thought to contain infinite detail. If you could zoom in far enough, if you had powerful enough instruments, you could see everything with perfect clarity. Ancient Greek philosophers imagined atoms as tiny, indivisible particles with perfectly defined shapes and positions. Medieval scholars believed that God could see every detail of creation with absolute precision. Even early modern scientists assumed that the universe was like a vast clockwork mechanism where every gear had an exact size and every wheel had a precise location. This belief in perfect resolution seemed reasonable because everything we could observe appeared to have definite properties. A rock has a specific weight. A tree has a particular height. The moon follows a precise orbit. If larger objects have exact properties, surely the smaller components that make them up must also have exact properties. But when scientists finally developed the tools to look at individual atoms and subatomic particles, they discovered something shocking. The closer they looked, the blurrier things became. The more precisely they tried to measure one property, the more uncertain other properties became. At first, everyone assumed this was a technical problem. Maybe their instruments weren't sensitive enough. Maybe they needed better technology. Maybe the act of measurement was somehow disturbing the delicate quantum systems they were trying to study. But Heisenberg realized something far more disturbing. This wasn't a problem with their instruments. This wasn't a limitation of technology. This was a fundamental feature of reality itself. The universe has a built-in resolution limit, like a cosmic pixelation that can never be overcome. Below a certain scale, reality becomes inherently fuzzy, permanently out of focus, impossible to sharpen no matter what tools you use. This resolution limit is encoded in what became known as Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, but the name doesn't capture how radical this discovery really was. It's not just that we can't know certain things with perfect precision. It's that these things don't have precise values to be known. Think about what this means. When you look at your hand, you see sharp edges where your fingers end and space begins. But according to quantum mechanics, those edges don't actually exist. At the quantum level, your hand is a fuzzy cloud of probability that gradually fades into the surrounding space. There's no precise boundary where you ends and not you begins. Every atom in your body is surrounded by a cloud of electrons that don't have definite positions. These electron clouds overlap and blend with the electron clouds of neighboring atoms. The boundaries between atoms are fuzzy. The boundaries between molecules are fuzzy. The boundaries between you and everything else are fuzzy. You think you're a discrete object with clear boundaries, but you're actually a quantum blur, a probability smear that extends indefinitely into space, gradually fading but never reaching exactly zero. And this isn't just true for you. It's true for everything in the universe. Every object, every particle, every property exists in a state of fundamental fuzziness that can never be brought into perfect focus. Let me give you a concrete example of how disturbing this really is. Right now, you probably think you know exactly where you are. You're sitting in a chair, or standing in a room, or lying on a bed. You have a precise location. But according to quantum mechanics, your location is fundamentally fuzzy. You don't exist at a precise point in space. You exist as a probability cloud that's most dense, where you feel like you are, but extends outward in all directions. There's a small but non-zero probability that parts of you are on the other side of the room. There's an even smaller but still non-zero probability that parts of you are on the other side of the planet. You're not located at a specific place. You're smeared across space like quantum butter on cosmic toast, with most of your you-ness concentrated in one region, but tiny amounts of you spread everywhere. This quantum fuzziness isn't just a quirk of subatomic particles. It affects everything, including the macroscopic objects you interact with every day. The chair you're sitting on doesn't have perfectly sharp edges. The walls of your room don't have exact locations. Even the Earth itself is slightly fuzzy at the quantum level. But why don't we notice this fuzziness in everyday life? Why does everything appear to be in perfect focus when it's actually quantum blur? The answer lies in something called quantum decoherence. When quantum systems interact with their environment, their fuzziness gets averaged out over many interactions. It's like looking at a pointillist painting from a distance. Up close, you see individual dots of color with fuzzy boundaries. But from far away, the dots blend together to create the illusion of sharp, continuous images. Your everyday experience is like looking at reality from a distance. You see the averaged out result of countless quantum interactions, which creates the illusion of sharpness and definiteness. But if you could somehow zoom in to the quantum level, you'd see that everything is made of fuzzy dots of probability. This means that the sharp, focused reality you experience is actually an illusion created by your limited perspective. You're like someone watching a movie who thinks the images on the screen are continuous, not realizing that they're actually made of discrete pixels that are too small to see individually. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Heisenberg's discovery suggests that this fuzziness isn't just a feature of small-scale physics. It might be a fundamental characteristic of existence itself. If reality is inherently out of focus at the quantum level, then maybe the concept of perfect focus is meaningless. Maybe the idea that things could have perfectly definite properties is just a human fantasy, a comforting illusion we've created to make sense of a universe that is inherently senseless. Think about what this implies for knowledge itself. For thousands of years, humans have believed that truth exists and can be discovered through careful observation and measurement. We've assumed that if we could just look closely enough, think clearly enough, measure precisely enough, we could understand reality completely. But Heisenberg's discovery suggests that this quest for perfect knowledge is doomed from the start. Reality itself resists perfect understanding because reality doesn't have the kind of definite properties that perfect understanding would require. It's like trying to take a perfectly sharp photograph of something that is inherently blurry. No matter how good your camera, no matter how steady your hand, no matter how perfect your lighting, you can never capture something in perfect focus if that something is fundamentally out of focus. This has profound implications for every field of human knowledge. Science can never achieve perfect precision because the universe itself isn't perfectly precise. Mathematics can never describe reality with absolute accuracy because reality doesn't have the kind of exact properties that mathematical descriptions assume. Even logic itself might be inadequate for understanding a universe that is fundamentally fuzzy. Classical logic assumes that statements are either true or false, that objects either have properties or they don't, that boundaries are either there or they aren't. But in a quantum universe, statements can be true and false simultaneously. Objects can have and not have properties at the same time, and boundaries can exist and not exist in the same moment. This suggests that human reason itself might be fundamentally mismatched to the nature of reality. We've evolved to perceive and think about a world of sharp boundaries and definite properties, but we actually live in a world of quantum fuzziness and fundamental uncertainty. Our brains are like cameras that automatically apply a sharpening filter to everything we perceive. We see crisp edges and definite boundaries because our neural processing creates the illusion of focus, not because reality actually has these characteristics. This raises disturbing questions about the nature of consciousness itself. If reality is fundamentally fuzzy, then what about the thoughts and experiences that make up your inner life? Are your thoughts perfectly definite, or are they also quantum blurs? Some researchers believe that consciousness itself might be a quantum phenomenon, subject to the same uncertainty principles that govern subatomic particles. This would mean that your thoughts don't have perfectly definite content. Your memories don't have precisely accurate details. Your sense of self doesn't have sharp boundaries. You might be experiencing quantum superpositions of different thoughts simultaneously, with your brain somehow averaging them out to create the illusion of having definite mental states. Your consciousness might be fundamentally out of focus, just like everything else in the universe. This could explain why human memory is so unreliable, why our perceptions are so easily influenced by context and expectation, why our sense of self feels both continuous and constantly changing. We might not be experiencing definite mental states, but probability clouds of possible mental states that collapse into apparent definiteness only when we try to observe them. Even more disturbing, if consciousness is quantum, then the boundary between you and the rest of the universe might be fundamentally fuzzy. You might not be a discrete entity with clear boundaries, but a quantum pattern that blends and overlaps with the quantum patterns of everything around you. This would mean that the separation between self and world, between observer and observed, between mind and matter, is itself an illusion created by the apparent focus of everyday experience. At the quantum level, everything might be connected in a vast, fuzzy web of overlapping probability clouds. Heisenberg himself was deeply disturbed by these implications. In his later writings, he described feeling like he was standing at the edge of a precipice, looking into a reality so alien that it threatened his sanity. He wrote about the terror of realizing that the solid, definite world of everyday experience was built on a foundation of quantum uncertainty. He tried to find ways to preserve some sense of objective reality, some anchor point of definiteness in a universe of fuzziness. But the mathematics was relentless. Every attempt to restore classical definiteness to quantum mechanics failed. The universe appeared to be irreducibly fuzzy all the way down. This led Heisenberg to one of the most radical conclusions in the history of science, that the classical concept of reality might be fundamentally wrong. Maybe there is no objective, definite reality independent of observation. Maybe reality is created by the act of measurement, crystallizing out of quantum fuzziness only when forced to by conscious observation. If this is true, then you're not just observing a pre-existing reality. You're participating in the creation of reality through your observations. Every time you look at something, you're forcing it to choose definite properties from its quantum superposition of possibilities. This means that the focused, definite reality you experience is actually a collaborative creation between your consciousness and the quantum fuzziness of the universe. Reality becomes focused only because consciousness forces it to focus, like a cosmic lens that brings quantum blur into apparent sharpness. But this raises even more disturbing questions. If consciousness creates focused reality out of quantum fuzziness, then what happens when no one is observing? Does reality dissolve back into complete blur? Are you constantly creating and destroying the focused world through your acts of attention and inattention? Maybe the universe is like a cosmic photograph that's constantly going in and out of focus, depending on who's looking at it and how they're looking. Maybe reality is fundamentally unstable, constantly shifting between focus and blur, definiteness and uncertainty, existence and non-existence. This could explain why the world sometimes feels dreamlike, why reality occasionally seems to shift and change in subtle ways, why our memories of the same events can be so different. We might be living in a universe that's constantly refocusing itself based on the collective observations of all conscious beings. And here's perhaps the most terrifying implication of all. If reality is fundamentally out of focus, then maybe perfect knowledge, perfect understanding, perfect truth are impossible not just in practice, but in principle. Maybe the human quest for absolute truth is like trying to photograph something that doesn't have definite visual properties. We might be doomed to live forever in a world of approximations, uncertainties, and quantum blurs, never able to achieve the kind of perfect understanding that we've always assumed was possible. The universe might be permanently, irreducibly mysterious, not because we haven't looked hard enough, but because there's nothing perfectly definite there to see. This doesn't mean that science is useless or that we should abandon the quest for knowledge, but it does mean that we need to accept that all knowledge is approximate, all understanding is partial, all truth is fuzzy around the edges. We need to learn to live with uncertainty, to embrace the blur, to find meaning and purpose in a universe that refuses to come into perfect focus. We need to develop what we might call quantum wisdom, the ability to navigate a reality that is fundamentally ambiguous, permanently uncertain, forever out of focus. And perhaps most importantly, we need to recognize that this fuzziness isn't a bug in the universe. It's a feature. The quantum uncertainty that makes perfect knowledge impossible also makes genuine novelty possible. If everything were perfectly definite, perfectly predictable, perfectly focused, then nothing new could ever happen. The universe would be a static, deterministic machine with no room for creativity, consciousness, or choice. But in a universe that's fundamentally out of focus, anything becomes possible. The quantum blur that prevents perfect prediction also allows for genuine surprise, authentic creativity, and real freedom. The same uncertainty that makes absolute knowledge impossible makes absolute control impossible too. You live in a universe where the future is genuinely open, where consciousness plays a real role in shaping reality, where every observation is an act of creation. The fuzziness that seems so disturbing when you first encounter it might actually be the source of everything that makes existence meaningful. Reality is out of focus, and it always will be. But maybe that's exactly how it should be. Maybe perfect focus would be perfect death, perfect stasis, perfect boredom. Maybe the quantum blur is what makes life, consciousness, and creativity possible. You are not a perfectly defined entity living in a perfectly definite universe. You are a quantum pattern of possibility, temporarily crystallized into apparent definiteness by the act of conscious observation, forever embedded in a reality that is fundamentally, beautifully, terrifyingly out of focus. And once you accept this, once you embrace the blur, you might discover that living in an uncertain universe is far more interesting than living in a certain one. The quantum fuzziness that initially seems so threatening might actually be the source of everything you value most about existence. Welcome to the out-of-focus universe, where nothing is perfectly clear, everything is slightly fuzzy, and that fuzziness is the foundation of all the beauty, mystery, and possibility that makes life worth living. Reality is out of focus, and that might be the most beautiful truth of all.